I paid off a crushing debt to save our family home, thinking I was protecting everything we'd built. By the next morning, I woke up to an empty house, a short note on the counter, and the news that they'd sold the home behind my back. Stay with me while I tell you everything, and if it touches your heart, maybe share it with someone who needs to hear it. My name is Ayanna Brooks, I'm 30 years old, and I work as a nurse in Atlanta. Life hasn't ever been easy for me, but I've always tried to push forward no matter how heavy things got. The house I live in, or at least I thought I lived in, wasn't just a roof over my head. It was my grandmother's home. She raised me there, and every corner of it carried her memory. When she passed, she left it to me, and it became the one thing I refused to let go of. It was my safe place, the only part of my past that gave me comfort when life got rough. But life has a way of testing you. After my mother died, I discovered debts in her name that were tied to the house. I didn't even know about them until the foreclosure letters started coming. I can't even describe the feeling of standing in that kitchen, reading papers that said the house could be taken away. It felt like my grandmother was slipping away from me all over again. So I did what I had to do. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital, sometimes working 16 hours straight. I would drag myself home when the sky was already turning light again, only to shower, eat something quick, and head back. I told myself it was worth it, because every dollar I saved was one step closer to keeping my grandmother's house safe. The exhaustion broke me at times. I'd sit in the hospital locker room, head in my hands, crying quietly because I didn't know how I'd get through another shift. My friends told me to sell the house and start over somewhere new, but they didn't understand. That house wasn't just bricks and wood. It was family, history, love, and survival all in one. I couldn't let it go. Month after month, I put everything into those payments. No vacations, no shopping, no nights out. Just bills, food, and the debt. Sometimes I would come home and see my husband Deshaun scrolling on his phone, relaxed, while I could barely keep my eyes open. I told myself he was stressed too, that he would find his footing. I wanted to believe we were in this together. And finally, after what felt like a lifetime, I made the last payment. I stood there holding the receipt, my hands shaking. I thought, this is it, we're safe now. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I believed I had protected not only the house, but the family I thought I had built inside it. I didn't know that relief would only last one night. Living in that house wasn't just about me anymore. I shared it with my husband, Deshaun, who was 32, and his younger sister, Imani, who had moved in temporarily, but somehow never left. At first, I didn't mind. Family is family, and I thought having extra people around might make the house feel more alive. But as months passed, what was supposed to be short-term turned into something that quietly weighed me down. Deshaun never stopped talking about selling the house. It became almost like a broken record. Every other week he'd bring it up. Ayanna, we could get a nicer place. Something modern. Somewhere with better schools and a better neighborhood. Don't you think it's time we start fresh? His words always rubbed against me like sandpaper. He couldn't understand what the house meant to me. This wasn't just some building. It was the last real piece of my grandmother I had left. She had poured her life into that home, and the walls held every memory of her love. Selling it would feel like erasing her. Each time I told him no, the conversations grew colder. I could feel the distance between us stretching. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about loyalty, about respect. I wanted him to stand with me, to see what I saw in that home, but instead he acted like I was stubborn and unreasonable. The tension only grew worse with the money situation. I was the one working long hours at the hospital, holding everything together, while Deshaun bounced from one odd job to another, never sticking with anything. Some weeks he wouldn't even bring in a paycheck, and I'd come home to find him watching TV or playing on his phone like the bills weren't piling up. I carried the weight of our lives on my shoulders, and it made me feel like I was drowning alone. And then there was Imani. At first, I welcomed her, thinking she just needed a soft landing while she figured things out. But soon I started noticing little things that didn't sit right with me. I'd catch her flipping through drawers in the study where I kept important papers. When I asked her what she was doing, she'd laugh it off, saying she was just looking for stamps or envelopes. But my gut told me different. Sometimes I'd walk into a room and both Deshaun and Imani would stop talking suddenly, exchanging glances that made my skin crawl. Late at night, I'd hear them whispering in the kitchen, their voices low and secretive. When I'd step in, they'd smile too quickly, pretending like it was nothing. I wanted to believe it was all in my head, that maybe stress was making me suspicious, but the unease wouldn't leave me. Deep down, I knew something was brewing between them, something I wasn't meant to know. The air in my own home no longer felt safe. It felt like it was turning against me. The day I finally cleared the debt felt unreal. For months I had lived inside a cycle of exhaustion. Early mornings, long shifts, nights so heavy I'd barely remember falling into bed. Every paycheck had been sliced into bills and debt, and it felt like my life was on pause until the balance was gone. When I walked out of the bank with the final receipt in my hand, I couldn't stop smiling. My chest felt lighter than it had in years. I had done it. The house was safe. That night, I decided to share the news over dinner. I wanted it to be special, a moment to breathe together, to celebrate as a family. I cooked a proper meal, something I hadn't done in a while because I'd always been too tired. Roast chicken, rice, collard greens, and cornbread. I set the table like it mattered, because it did. When we sat down, I took a deep breath and told them, "The house is officially ours. No more debt. No foreclosure. We're safe now." The words almost trembled out of me, but they carried so much pride. I expected smiles, maybe even hugs, some sign that they felt the weight lifted too. But the reaction wasn't what I imagined. Deshaun leaned back in his chair, chewing slowly, his eyes not meeting mine. Instead of relief, there was something unreadable on his face, almost like annoyance. Imani looked up briefly, then immediately started talking about something else. The new boutique she wanted to check out, the kind of car she thought about buying one day. It was as if my news hadn't even landed. I laughed it off at first, nervously trying to fill the silence. "You all don't get it, this is huge. I've been killing myself to save this house, and it's done now. We're secure." Still, neither of them shared in my excitement. Deshaun mumbled something about being tired, and Imani changed the topic again, talking about a show she was binging. It stung, but I told myself they were just distracted. Maybe they didn't understand the stress I had been under, or maybe their minds were wrapped around their own problems. I didn't want to ruin my own happiness by pushing for the reaction I craved. So I let it go, telling myself they would feel it later. After dinner, I cleaned up while they drifted off into their own worlds, Deshaun scrolling through his phone, Imani humming in the other room. I tried not to dwell on it, because nothing could take away the pride that swelled inside me. That night, I collapsed into bed, my body aching but my heart finally calm. For the first time in so long, I didn't fall asleep worrying about deadlines or notices. I drifted off with a quiet smile, believing the hardest part of the storm had passed, and that tomorrow would start a better chapter for us all. The morning after I paid off the debt, I woke up expecting peace. Instead, the silence around me felt wrong. The house, usually filled with at least some sound, Deshaun's music, Imani on the phone, even just the creak of footsteps, was empty. Too empty. I got up, calling out for them. "Deshaun." Nothing. "Imani." Still nothing. My chest tightened as I moved through each room, my voice louder, more desperate. The couches were bare, some of their clothes gone, even Imani's purse that she always left by the door. My stomach dropped before I even reached the kitchen. On the counter sat a folded piece of paper. My hands shook as I picked it up. In rushed handwriting, the words hit me like a blow. "Don't call us. It's done. The house is sold." I read it again and again, the meaning twisting deeper with every second. My knees almost gave out. My safe place, the home I had bled and sacrificed for, wasn't mine anymore because of them. Heart racing, I tore through the drawers where I kept important documents. The folder that held the house deed, payment records, and my grandmother's old papers gone. My breath came shallow. They had taken them. I grabbed my phone, calling every contact I could think of. The lawyer's office. The bank. Finally, after being passed between voices that spoke in flat tones, someone told me the unthinkable. The house had already been transferred. Signed. Sold. My name was there on the paperwork, but not in my handwriting. It was forged. I dropped the phone, clutching the counter to steady myself. My head pounded, and I could barely see through the blur of angry tears. My own husband, the man I had fought to build a life with, and his sister, who I welcomed into my home, had stolen it right out from under me. I called again, desperate, hoping there had been some mistake. But every word that came back confirmed it. The house was gone. Someone else owned it now. They had cashed in, and I was left with nothing. I pressed the note to my chest, my fingers digging into the paper as if I could squeeze the truth out of it. "Why?" I whispered into the empty room. The silence swallowed my voice, mocking me. Rage and heartbreak collided so fiercely inside me that I thought I might shatter. Every double shift, Every night I dragged my body home aching and broken, every tear I shed thinking I was saving us. All of it had been for them to betray me in the cruelest way possible. Standing in the hollow quiet of that kitchen, I realized this wasn't just a loss of property. It was the destruction of trust, of love, of everything I thought was real. The betrayal didn't feel human. It felt unreal, like something too vicious to come from the people closest to me. Yet the empty house around me told me it was all too real. I called the police first, my voice shaking as I tried to explain what had happened. I told them about the forged signatures, the stolen documents, the note left on my counter. The officer on the other end sounded polite, but detached, like this was just another problem on a long list. "Ma'am," he said, "when it comes to family disputes and property transfers, it can be very hard to prove. You'll need legal representation." His words stung. I wasn't just some woman complaining. I had been robbed of my home. Next, I tried the county office, thinking maybe there was a chance to stop the sale before it went through. But it was too late. Everything was finalized. Deshawn and Imani had planned it perfectly. By the time I pieced everything together, the money had already been collected. They were gone. I tried calling their phones over and over, each time going straight to voicemail. The sickening realization hit me. They hadn't just left me behind, they had erased me from the life we were supposed to share. Word spread quickly among friends, and instead of comfort, some of them blamed me. "Ayana, you should have seen this coming." He was never serious about his responsibilities. Others shook their heads, saying, "You trust too much. You always put others first." Hearing those words cut me deeper than they realized. Yes, I had trusted. I believed love meant sacrifice. I believed family meant loyalty. And now, here I was, betrayed and homeless, carrying the weight of everyone else's doubts on top of my own pain. The first night after it all sank in, I drove aimlessly around Atlanta with nowhere to go. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. I thought about the kitchen where my grandmother used to cook, about the porch where I played as a little girl, about every corner of that house that had been stolen from me. By midnight, I parked in a quiet grocery store lot and leaned the seat back. That car became my shelter. The darkness inside it felt heavy, pressing against me while tears streamed down my face. I was numb, then angry, then broken all over again. I stared at the ceiling and asked myself how the people closest to me could destroy everything I had fought for. But even in that crushing moment, something inside me hardened. Yes, I was sleeping in my car. Yes, I had been fooled, abandoned, and robbed. But I wasn't finished. I wouldn't let them win. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, and instead of collapsing, I let that image fuel me. I promised myself through clenched teeth that this wouldn't be the end of my story. They thought they had left me with nothing, but they had forgotten one thing. I still had the strength to fight back. I didn't stay in my car forever. After a few nights of broken sleep and cold showers at the hospital, one of my coworkers, Tasha, noticed something was wrong. She didn't press me with questions, just handed me a spare key and said, "Come stay in my extra room until you figure things out." Her kindness cracked me open. I cried harder than I had in days. For the first time since everything fell apart, I felt like maybe I wasn't completely alone. At her place, I began to pick myself back up, little by little. The anger burned too hot to let me stay down for long. I couldn't stop thinking about Deshawn and Imani, about the smug way they had vanished with everything I worked for. One night, scrolling through social media, I found my answer. There they were, in Houston, posting pictures like nothing had happened. New clothes, fancy dinners, smiling with drinks in their hands. Imani even posed in front of a sleek car, the caption bragging about new beginnings. My stomach twisted, but beneath the disgust was something sharper. Determination. I started searching for options, and that's when I found a lawyer who specialized in fraud cases. His name was Mr. Lawson, and when I sat across from him, I laid out every detail. The note, the forged papers, the empty house. He listened carefully, his eyes narrowing as I spoke. Finally, he said, "If you can get proof, messages, documents, financial records, this case is winnable." His voice was steady, and for the first time, I felt like justice wasn't just a dream. That night, I went digging through old backups of my phone and computer. Hours passed as I clicked through saved files, scrolled through forgotten texts, and reread emails I had once ignored. And then I found it. A string of messages from Deshawn to one of his friends months back, where he complained about me being too attached to that old house. In one, he wrote, "She'll never let it go. But don't worry, I've got a plan to get rid of it one way or another. My chest tightened as I read it. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some impulsive act done in the heat of the moment. He had planned it, step by step, while I broke my body to pay off the debt. I printed everything, highlighting the parts that dripped with his intentions. The more I uncovered, the more pieces came together. Bank notifications showing sudden transfers. Draft emails from Imani asking about buyers. It was all there, waiting to be stitched into a net that would finally trap them. Sitting in that small room at Tasha's apartment, surrounded by papers and evidence, I felt a shift inside me. The sadness that once drowned me was giving way to something sharper, stronger. They thought they had buried me, but I was building the very tools that would dig me out and bury them instead. Piece by piece, the trail started to come together. With Mr. Lawson's guidance, I pulled bank statements and records that painted a clear picture of where the money had gone. My stomach churned as I read through the transfers. The buyer's funds had landed directly in a brand new account with Deshawn's name on it. No attempt to hide it, no clever tricks, just bold, arrogant theft. Digging deeper, I uncovered something even more infuriating. A large chunk of the money was withdrawn in cash only days after the sale. Soon after, Imani posted pictures online, showing off a shiny black car. She posed beside it with the caption, "Paid in full." My fists clenched as I stared at the screen. That car wasn't bought with her money. It was bought with mine, with the blood and sweat I poured into saving the house. I brought everything to Lawson. The transfers, the screenshots, the old emails and texts where Deshawn admitted to wanting the house gone. He flipped through the pages, nodding slowly. "Ayana, this isn't just betrayal, it's fraud. It's theft. And we have enough to prove it." Hearing those words gave me a rush of energy I hadn't felt in weeks. For so long, I had been on the losing side, watching everything slip away. Now, for the first time, I could see a path forward. With Lawson's help, I filed both a civil lawsuit and criminal charges. The paperwork felt heavy in my hands, but instead of breaking me, it gave me strength. Of course, Deshawn didn't take it quietly. Not long after the case was filed, he started sending me messages. At first, they were smug. "You should just move on, Ayana. The house is gone, and so are we." Then they turned taunting. "Funny how you worked so hard just for me to cash in. Guess I played smarter, not harder." Each word stung, but instead of dragging me down, they fueled me. Every cruel sentence was another nail in his own coffin. I saved every message, every text, every arrogant remark he thought would crush me. Each one became more proof of his guilt, more weight for the judge to see. Meanwhile, Imani stayed quieter, but her silence was telling. She didn't post as much, and when she did, it was only flashes of that car or little hints of their new life in Houston. To the outside world, they looked like they were thriving. But I knew the truth. I knew their foundation was built on lies, and I was ready to rip it apart. The balance of power was shifting. I wasn't just the woman they left behind. I was the storm they didn't see coming. With the lawsuit moving forward and charges on the table, I finally felt like the tables were turning. They thought they had stolen my future. What they didn't realize was that I was about to take theirs. The day of the hearing, I walked into the courthouse with my head held high, though inside my stomach twisted in knots. The room smelled faintly of paper and polish, and the echo of shoes on the tile reminded me that this was no dream. It was the moment I had been waiting for. Across the aisle sat Deshawn and Imani. He leaned back in his chair with that same smug grin I once mistook for charm, while she kept her eyes low, fidgeting with her hands. When the judge asked me to speak, I stood and felt every ounce of pain and strength I had carried rush to the surface. My voice shook at first, but then it grew steady, louder, filled with the truth I had buried for too long. "I worked myself to the bone to save that house," I said, locking eyes with Deshawn. "I sacrificed sleep, health, and happiness because I believed in protecting our future, our family. And while I was breaking my back, you were plotting behind mine. You didn't just take a house. You betrayed every ounce of trust, every bit of love, every sacrifice I made." The courtroom was silent except for my words. I turned toward Imani, who finally looked up, her eyes wet. "And you," I continued. "I let you into my home when you had nowhere to go. I treated you like a sister. You repaid me by stealing the last piece of my grandmother I had left. That kind of disloyalty cuts deeper than any debt ever could." Then came the evidence. Mr. Lawson presented copies of the forged signatures, the stolen documents, the bank records showing the money landing in Deshawn's account. The screenshots of Imani's cash purchase of her car, and even the arrogant texts where Deshawn mocked me for working so hard. Each page laid bare the truth they tried to bury. The judge leaned forward, her expression hard. "The evidence is clear," she said. "This was a deliberate act of fraud and theft." My heart pounded as I gripped the edge of the table. The sale of the house will be reversed immediately, and charges are to be filed against both parties. For the first time, Deshawn's confident smirk cracked. His jaw tightened, his face twisting with disbelief, as though he couldn't accept that the lies he spun were finally unraveling. He leaned toward his lawyer, whispering furiously, but nothing could change the outcome. Imani broke completely. Tears streamed down her face as she covered her mouth with trembling hands. The same woman who once strutted around my kitchen like she owned it now sat hunched, sobbing, while the judge's words sealed her fate. I stood still, my hands shaking, but inside I felt a fire of justice burning. After everything they had done, after every night I spent in pain and doubt, I had faced them, and won. The house, my grandmother's house, was coming back to me, and so was my power. When the ruling became official, I walked out of that courthouse with a copy of the order in my hand. The house was mine again. Legally restored, every paper corrected, every lie undone. I held that document like it was gold, not because of its weight, but because of what it represented: justice. Meanwhile, Deshawn and Imani were left in shambles. The money they thought would carry them into a new life was gone, swallowed by legal fees, penalties, and restitution. The court froze their accounts, the shiny car Imani bought was repossessed, and they faced criminal charges that would follow them like shadows. The two of them had gone from bragging about luxury to scrambling for survival. It didn't take long for the community to hear what happened. Neighbors who once smiled at Deshawn now whispered when his name came up. Old friends who had once admired Imani's style and confidence avoided her completely. Their reputations, once carefully polished, were ruined. People shook their heads, saying how selfish and cruel it was to betray family for money. They became cautionary tales, names spoken in lowered tones at barbershops, churches, and cookouts. For me, the victory was sweet but not simple. The emotional toll lingered. I would walk into the house and still feel the echo of their betrayal. Some nights I sat in the living room, staring at the walls, remembering the note they left on the counter. The pain hadn't vanished, it just lived beside the relief. I had to face the truth. The wounds they left behind wouldn't close overnight. But slowly, I began to reclaim the space. I poured myself into fixing the house, making it truly mine for the first time. I painted the rooms brighter, tore down the curtains Imani once insisted on hanging, and replaced the old, worn furniture with pieces I chose for myself. With every stroke of paint, with every nail hammered, it felt like I was erasing their presence, rewriting the story of the home. One weekend, I planted flowers in the front yard: daisies, roses, and lilacs, the kinds my grandmother used to love. As I knelt in the dirt, I felt her memory close, like she was smiling down at me. This house wasn't just restored on paper. It was alive again, breathing with the love and loyalty it was always meant to hold. I stood on the porch after finishing the garden, looking at the house glowing in the evening light. For the first time, it didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like peace. Yes, they had taken me through hell. Yes, I had cried until my body ached. But in the end, I was still standing, and the house, my grandmother's house, was still mine. Justice had been served. And this time, the home was not just a memory of the past. It was the foundation of my future. When the dust finally settled, I made one decision that I never looked back on. I cut all ties with Deshawn and Imani. No calls, no messages, no attempts to understand their side of the story. They had shown me exactly who they were, and I wasn't about to let them back into my life to cause more damage. Some people begged me to at least hear them out, but I refused. Family isn't about blood, it's about loyalty. And they had destroyed any chance of redemption. With them gone, I turned my focus inward. I poured myself into my nursing career, taking the extra time and energy I once wasted worrying about them and putting it into my patients and my future. Work became a place where I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I started taking courses to move up in my field, and little by little, I felt my confidence growing again. At home, the silence that once haunted me turned into peace. I no longer waited for the sound of doors slamming or hushed voices plotting behind my back. The house became a sanctuary, a place of healing rather than hurt. I learned how to rest again, how to enjoy simple things like cooking a meal for myself or sitting on the porch with a cup of tea. But the biggest transformation wasn't in my career or even the house. It was inside me. The betrayal had carved deep wounds, ones that sometimes still ached late at night. Yet through those wounds, I found strength I never knew I had. I discovered that I could rebuild after being torn apart, that I could stand even when the people I trusted most tried to break me. One evening, I sat in my grandmother's restored living room, the walls freshly painted, the air warm with the scent of the flowers I had planted outside. The furniture was new, the decorations mine, but the soul of the house felt the same. I leaned back into the couch, letting the quiet wash over me, and realized something powerful. I hadn't just reclaimed the house. I had reclaimed myself. Betrayal cuts deep. It can feel worse than death, because the person who wounds you is someone you let close enough to hold your heart. But revenge, when served through justice, doesn't just punish them. It frees you. It gives you back the power they tried to steal. As I sat there, the evening sun streaming through the curtains, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. I thought of my grandmother, of the sacrifices I made, of the pain I endured, and I smiled. This was my victory. This was my home. And finally, after everything, this was my life again. Do you believe Ayana made the right choice by cutting ties forever? Or should she have given Deshawn and Imani another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really like to hear them. And if you enjoy stories like this, remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one.